Good evening and a very warm welcome to the Black Hole. Today we are going to discuss the resilience of Afghanistan's girls who, despite the odds, continue to fight for their lives and dreams. And hence the title, Afghanistan's Girls Denied a Life but Still Fighting. We are very grateful to our speaker. We have Sola Mahfouz with us, who will shortly join us on Zoom. She is an Afghan-born scientist and writer. She was barred from school at age 11, but she did not give up on her education. Her detailed introduction will be given by Dr. Pervez Hoodbhoy, who will moderate today's session. So, इससे पहले कि हम ये session शुरू करें, please do us a favor and रोज़ाना की तरह turn your cell phones to silent mode so that there is no distraction. When the house is open for Q&A, आप भी गुफ्तगू को ज्वाइन कर सकते हैं. जस्ट रेज योर हैंड और माइक्रोफोन अपने हाथ में आने के बाद आप अपनी जो भी बात है वो कीजिएगा. लेडीज़ एंड जेंटलमैन, प्लीज़ वेलकम डॉक्टर परवेज हूदभाई एंड सोला महफूज. थैंक यू.
Thank you, Nair. On the 15th of August 2021, the Taliban took over Kabul. And at that time, the Prime Minister of Pakistan said, the Afghans have broken their chains of slavery. Now, this was the culmination of many years of war, beginning in 1979, but then after 9/11, it entered a new phase. And ultimately, the Taliban were successful in establishing their emirate in Afghanistan. Now, whether this was actually freedom for Afghanistan or not, we will hear from Sola Mahfouz, who was born at the time when the Taliban first took over Kabul, and that was 1996. At that time, a lot of Pakistanis had also welcomed the Taliban takeover. And so we here in Pakistan bear at least some responsibility for what happened over there and what is happening there. What we will hear from Sola Mahfouz is her life story in the beginning, and then after a little bit of discussion with her, I will open the floor for all of you to intervene. She is presently at Tufts University. Tufts is in Boston, Massachusetts, and she has been there now for several years. So, Sola, are you there? Can you hear us? Oh, good.
Yes.
Oh, all right, there you are. I can see you. So, Sola, tell us about your journey through life so that we are acquainted with you. We know, and start at the very beginning. How long were you in Afghanistan? Who your parents were? What they did? When you went to school, how was it then? So tell us everything about yourself so that we get to know you.
Sure. Thank you so much for everyone coming here, and I'm really looking forward to the discussions. And so I think when I look at myself, I'm largely shaped by my family, I think, as every individual. And I think it's very important, especially in Afghanistan, who your family is. And my family was shaped by Afghanistan that was different. And that goes back to, the 1950s when my maternal grandfather was. And I think when we look at Afghanistan right now, we should really think, as you mentioned, we should really think like, it's like we're in a deep crisis. And that didn't just emerge. It has like long memories and history. And in the 1950s, it's when Afghanistan was becoming a more modern state. I mean, I think it's like a general, the idea of a nation state is modern one, and Afghanistan was becoming one. And it's like when the king introduced constitutions giving rights to women and trying to create political parties. And my grandfather was actually in one of the group, which called Awakened Youth, like Wikh Zulmian. And they went to create in Kandahar, create equal spaces for women and make the burqa not a mandatory to wear. And this is like those years my mom was born. So she starts to grow up in Afghanistan that created a new identity for itself. And she was going to school, of course, and she would tell me stories that I just thought it was like from a fairy tale. Like her friends coming to school on a bicycle, her teachers driving a car, and so and like for her, like that's like at age 15, 14, all of that, like all her focus was on what is she gonna do next. And so both from my mom's and my father's side, all of my aunts went to study. Some of them went to get scholarship in Russia. So this was Afghanistan that my father and my mother grew up in. And of course, it wasn't just as like every country. It at each period of time it goes in like two tracks. And as it was modernizing, there was, of course, discontent of people wanted to go back to its old ways and resisting the new. But those were not big; they were small. But when the when the communists took over and the Soviet invaded, that's when all the people who were resisting everything, the change starting back in the 1950s, were getting funds from the US and its allies, and of course one was of Pakistan, and they all not only like militarily supported but also ideologically creating this extreme Islamic ideology to kill the communist ideology. And that's when things started to got worse. And my aunt, one was a teacher, and my mom at that time was become like professor at Kabul University from the same university that she graduated. And so my aunt told me stories of how they would hear stories of Mujahideen fighters telling like, oh, so as soon as we enter Kabul, all those women who are on this clacking heels, we're just gonna cut their feet. And they would be like, oh, like who are they? Like they're never gonna come to Kabul. Like, they were just so they just thought like the life that they had was there and it's never gonna change. And so this was Afghanistan, and then all the Mujahideen, like all the people who were like fighting, they came under this one banner of Mujahideen, and the fighter became fierce, and eventually the Soviets withdrew, and that's resulted into like a civil war. So this is like one period of Afghanistan, and there was this horrible, like extremely violent and bloody civil war that followed, which destroyed everything, the very fabric of Afghan society. And of course, there was no question of women going to school. Like women were afraid for their very existence. And my family that went from Kabul to Kandahar, because there was a lot of Afghanistan has been a tribal and ethnically divided society, so that division became violent, and everyone had to go back to their old spaces, the places that they were born to be safe. And so that's like the early 90s, and then and then the Taliban emerged to calm the civil war, or like to kind of put a pause into on this, like one group becoming powerful enough to take over everyone else.
Okay. I want to start the story a little earlier, in the 1970s. I know you weren't around, but when Nur Muhammad Taraki made the Communist Party and Kabul came under his influence, what were your parents doing? What did they think about that at that time? And let me continue this question. What if they had been allowed to build a society without intervention from the United States, which came in 1979? What is your speculation on that, and what do your parents say about that?
So my parents my father was by that like a businessman, and my mom was a professor at Kabul University. They were not like involved in politics, but my grandfather he was a communist, and he wasn't he was disillusioned by the both parties, because before the Taraki there was before Babra Karmal, okay, yeah, Taraki, okay, sorry, I always mix those people. Yeah, Taraki, it was so divided, and like Hafizullah Amin, and these people really didn't care about, the idea of communism for equality and all of that. They just wanted to get rid of the monarchy. And even like I studied back the history again, and it's all like they exactly when they took over Daud, like when they get it, when they did this coup and killed Daud Khan, they exactly did it in the same fashion as the Bolshevik Revolution when they in Russia, where they killed everyone with the king with the family. And so I think they weren't really like thinking in the big picture. They just cared about their own to get into power in some ways on their own and get rid of monarchy. So there's no like this birthright to be like a king or like the ruler of the country. So that's my thing. I don't think like communism was a salvation for Afghanistan, because it just like the people who were doing it were not doing it for that purpose. Like the leaders, like Taraki and Babrak Karmal that came after.
Well, you're quite right. They were traditional Bolsheviks, and they wanted the Communist Party in the manner of what was in the Soviet Union at the time of Lenin, and then later Stalin, and so forth. But okay, let's leave that strain of politics aside. Tell us a little bit about your early years. So 1996, you were born in Kandahar, or
Yes.
Kandahar?
Yeah, I was born in Kandahar.
Okay.
Yes, I was born in Kandahar in 1996, and
So
course,
were there schools at that time? Of course, you probably started going to school after the Taliban government fell in 2001. Is that
yes,
right? So tell us, start your story from there.
from start going to school.
Yeah.
Sure. Yes. So I was born in 1996, and school were banned, and like some of there are some underground schools that my older sister or my cousin would like hidingly go to, and so. But there was no like proper schools. And then in 2001, when the 9/11 happened and the US invaded, so in 2002, actually, this early 2002 school started. And during the war, we were actually in Pakistan for 3 months. It's like the bombardment and everything that started. But like we moved back in, and I think I remember, of course, I was young, and before like the Taliban time, there was no TV, no music, nothing. And so when we were returning back from Pakistan, my father bought a TV, and then we just it's just like the music. It's just like I felt like everything, like the world has opened up. It was just felt like, and so yeah, we started going to school, and initially I was so excited about going to school, because before that my mom would teach us, and I just like there's something like I was so excited about going to school, but as soon as I went there, of course, Afghanistan went through so much war, and like we had to sit on this like floor. It just, I think, like the image I had about school, it just was broken, and so since I went to school like for 5 years, and I hated school. The teachers were not educated themselves. Most of the educated population of Afghanistan left the civil war back in the times of the civil war, and so some of the teachers were all of them were male teachers, and also like they really didn't care about teaching us. They just cared about like having that job. And like sometimes like I would go with my father, like at night I would see some of the same teachers selling vegetables, and I just, for some reason, I was also afraid that if I listen to them, I will end up like them. Like I would become like my life will become like theirs. And so yeah, I was very rebellious and I hated school, but like one day that stopped, not by choice, but by force, because that's in 2006 and around 2007, the Taliban were making its comeback. They were there was like suicide bombing exploding, and also they were threatening girls and families who were going to schools. And one day they did the same thing to my family, and that's when I stopped going to school.
So then, how is it that you are today a researcher in quantum computing? That takes a lot of mathematics, and there was nobody to teach you mathematics. So where did you get that from?
Yeah, so as I said, I've been shaped by my family a lot. My grandfather was self-taught. At that time, at his times, his father was very conservative, so he didn't let him go to school. But eventually he found his way and like learn English. And then he became a poet, a philosopher, a writer. And I had so much respect and admiration for him. And he would say things like, if you know English, it's like opening a window to the world. It doesn't matter where you are. You can still, access the world through that window. And he would say, like, don't make an excuse if you say, okay, I don't have time to learn. It's just like if you learn one word a day, it's like 365 words a year, and that's still better than nothing. And so when I stopped going to school, of course, I did not understand what that meant. I was just happy not going to school. But my mom, of course, she was educated, and she would like sometimes tell us like, do you know how it feels for an educated mother to see growing up her kids uneducated? And so she had so much hope for this, one generation of her kids remained uneducated because of the Taliban. And so the next generation, when the school opened, she was so happy for our future. But that ended very soon for the girls, while my brothers were still going to school. And so, for 3 years or something, I didn't really care much. But then I began to see like why I can't do this, and it's just the logic failed to convince me. Just because I'm a girl, I can't do things. And then I start to question everything, like, why is the world the way it is? What is this? Like, what's the meaning of my life? Why I exist? And it's like every day was the same. So I think those questions were natural to come. And so inspired by my grandfather, I started learning English. I thought like I felt like I needed that window. And so I got really obsessed with learning English because in some sense, I also kind of internalized, like, maybe it's like women are in this position, like, they don't have rights. They're not talking about the big things that the men talk about. Maybe they're stupid or something. But when I started learning English, I was learning, I was able to learn. And even though it was hard, like I would like watch for BBC and CNN like for hours and hours and just understand a word or two. But it was enough to keep me going that I was able to learn. And so, okay, this continued for 2 years. And then in 2012, I was 16 years old. So by then I had enough like grasp of English to read and listen. And so my brother was going to Pakistan because there was to go to for medical purposes. And so I was mostly like watching like war, like news that was full of war and violence. And I asked him, like, just bring me anything that's in English and it's not about news. And he brought me a Time magazine. And there I was flipping through it and I found out about Khan Academy. And when I was read as like this passage about Sal Khan, and I felt immediately like this is what I needed. It's like learn anything, anywhere for free. And I immediately opened my laptop and opened Khan Academy. And the first like page was the advertisement of like the beauty of algebra. And I have overheard conversation from my brothers and cousins talking about how hard algebra was. And so I felt like, oh, maybe this is not for me. This Khan Academy might be too advanced. But like after 2 or 3 days, I was still curious to see what I can still learn on Khan Academy. And I went to ask my brother, was like, what comes after addition and subtraction? Because that's all I knew from school, like addition and subtraction. And so he told me fraction. And so when I went to like search fraction, it was there, like it was there. But of course, like I have to go back to also properly learn my addition and subtraction as well. And so I just like soon I was just obsessed with learning math because it was so structured. It's like if I don't like I couldn't understand like a thing here, like I have to go back and like fill in the gaps, and I had many gaps, and it's like in the 3 years I was able to learn like algebra, functions, and start like calculus. Yeah, and it's not just math. And I was also, because of my questions of existence and everything, I started learning physics and cosmology. And so that's where
Wow, that is
where they began.
that is so heartwarming. You know, we had Salman Khan over here at the Black Hole. So he was in California. We were talking to him from here. And he would be quite thrilled to know your story.
He's actually a good friend.
Okay, all right. So you've already
so actually a good. He really likes that story.
Okay.
I do go to his home sometimes.
Marvelous,
like
marvelous.
Friend of mine.
Yeah. You see, people can get various things from the internet. They usually pick up stories, music, videos, this, that. But what really makes me very happy is when they learn math from the internet. You learned your algebra, you learned your calculus that way, and that shows that a lot of people can do it. In rural Pakistan, there's no hope that you will get a sophisticated math teacher. But now you see, the point is that everybody can learn these things by herself or himself. Okay, so that was 2012 when you were 16 years old. And
yes.
Then you applied to the US. And so this was the time of Hamid Karzai, or was it Ashraf Ghani at that time?
Ashraf
Ghani. Okay. Then you applied to the United States, and you obviously needed to get into some college. Which college did you go to?
So yeah, I was. It's like 2019. I began to think like I have to, okay, I know all those things. There is no, like, I can't just sit at home and in my room and learn like how much I would learn on my own. And it's like I could see like I need like another path. And so I had to think about, and of course, because I studied on my own, I needed, how do I prove to people that I know things? And so I had to take an exam. And actually, I came to Pakistan to take the SAT, which is to apply to colleges in the US. I needed that exam, and IELTS, which is an English exam. And so I didn't, because my uncle was going, and so it wasn't just like, my family was supportive enough to not stop me, but not like, oh yeah, wherever you want to take the test, let's go. So my uncle was going, and I was like, okay, I want to go with you, and I want to take the test. And by then I didn't even registered myself. And I came to Pakistan and to open it and said like, oh, the place is full. Like I can't take the test. But like after, again, like I think it's just like each step I took forward, it's just like a whole world of problems emerged. And so somehow I waited like for 3 months, and I took the SAT, and luckily I never in my life after my school time, I never took an exam, but I took that exam and luckily passed it, and also took the IELTS exam and came back. And so my score was good enough to apply to colleges in the US. And so I applied to colleges, and I got accepted to some. So one of them was ASU, and it gave me like a full ride scholarship. And the next step
I missed
was
that. Which university?
Arizona State University.
Arizona State University. Okay.
Yeah. And so so the next step was to get a visa. And I went with my mom to Kabul. It was my first time seeing Kabul. And just in 1 minute, the visa officer told me that he can't give me a visa without even looking at my SAT score, without even like the acceptance letters, nothing. Just asking my name, and just said, well, we can't give you a visa. And when I asked for a reason, it just said, well, we just don't think you're going to go there and study. You're just going there to immigrate. And it's like the first time in my life I realized how the world sees Afghans, and just like, and I just felt like the whole, it's like someone, it's like the ground. I just felt I was in this abyss, like, I couldn't go back. I couldn't just go backward and say, okay, I can't get a visa, and then I have to like restart my life in another way. I couldn't do that. And so again, after so many problems, I mean, like a person at the New York Times, like, then wrote about me, and I was able to get a visa through that. And I came to the US and I started college. It was 2016. Yeah, and I came to the US and started studying math and,
So
and
that's 7
physics.
years ago. Okay.
Yeah.
Are you still in contact with what remains of your family in Afghanistan?
Yes, yes. I think, yeah, it's not, luckily, most of the family, the people that are really close, that's, like my nephew and nieces, they're luckily outside of Afghanistan, but my cousins and everyone else, they are there. And it's extremely, yeah, it's like whenever you talk, I see my life, as a girl, like as a young woman, I can just do whatever. And yet, like, they're stuck, the girls, they can't go to school. And I see they could surpass me in so many levels, but yet they can't even go to like basic schools and have no hope for the future.
Well, all the pressure that's been applied by the external world hasn't resulted in any softening of the Taliban. They seem to be just as hardline as they were when they took over in 2021. Or is this just my perception? Is there some softening that you hear of which can give some hope to girls, to people over there? Are you sensing some degree of softening of the Taliban or not?
I think so. At least like the people that are there, like just a week ago, I talked to my cousins and she had $3, and they said, "Well, now the mullah has sworn that they will never let girls going to school." And then in Kandahar, they're also like after like now by age, like above age 10, they're not allowing girls to school. So that's like the lived experience of the people. But there's some journalists that I talk to, and then they say because the Taliban are not just like one group, so there's the Kandari ones, and then there's the like the Haqqanis, and so they said that the Kandari ones are the ones who are just like in the 90s. They like they are the ones who are not allowing girls to school, but the Haqqani, which is kind of ironic because they were the more in the militarily, they were the more extremists, like the suicide bombing, like the biggest attacks were because of them. But now, I don't know how much that is true, but they're saying like they want for girls to go to school. So I don't know how much that will result into anything hopeful, but that's what I hear.
You know, when we go to the audience in a while, I would like to understand how much of this comes from Pashtunwali and Afghan traditions, and how much of it comes from the kind of Deobandi Islam which the Taliban propagate. What do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I've been studying it a lot. Like, what's the Afghan? Like, what's the Pashtun identity? And I think, from what I know so far, it's I think being a Pashtun, we are Pashtun for more years than we are Muslim for years. So like Pashtun, it's like Islam. Pashtun existed before Islam, and if you look back to history, it's like the Taliban is a new phenomena. It's not something you can trace back to the origin of Afghanistan. And Afghanistan existed before. I mean, it's as old as civilization, and so I think it's really important. That's why I had to go back to history, like to history to understand it. What is this thing, and it's not a Pashtun thing. Yes, I think Afghanistan is a tribal society, and And I think it's like any other, as I said, like the idea of a modern state, a nation state is a modern one. And if we go back to look at the US, and like Afghanistan on paper gave women rights to vote 1 year before the US. So I think that tells you a lot. And if you also go to the poetry of Khashal Khan Khattak, and all of those people, they have like feminists, their poetry is feminists. And I think that's what reflects like who Pashtuns are, at least. And I think in every society, there are layers of them. Some people are going to be more progressive, some are going to be more going up like traditional. But I think Taliban are not a natural representation of Pashtun identity. It was like backed into like against the Soviet. This ideology was created, and it continues to haunt us.
Do you think people still remember the poetry of Khushal Khan Khattak? Is it?
I do. But again, I think it's mostly like the educated elites and those people who still want to hold on to their, because even I myself, I'm going back to those things again. When I was young, I just stopped caring about it. Like when I was learning, I was like, who cares? Like Afghanistan is the oldest civilization. What I care, my life is like there's war and blah, blah, blah. Why should I care about the history of my country? I just want to learn and get out. But now I go back and I understand those things, and I think it's empowering for me to say like, okay, I can reject all of that. This is not us, and I hope more and more people also. I mean, I'm writing and things, and hopefully make that identity alive.
And certainly there are things to look for over there. Khan Abdul Ghaffar Khan was I think the person who was the most enlightened leader in the last 100 years, or even earlier. Well, he died while the Soviets and the Americans were fighting, and he died in Pakistan, and his body was taken to Jalalabad or somewhere in Afghanistan, and the Taliban gave the body free passage. They stopped the war for just a few days. That's quite incredible. That shows that history is respected even by the extreme militants. So that's a point of hope. Now, before we end, I want to talk about what's most important. What is it that the world can do for the women, the girls of Afghanistan who are imprisoned in their homes? They are not allowed to go to school, to university, to have jobs. Is there something that can be done, or is it futile?
I think there is still a lot can be done, and I'm a little bit frustrated because I think a lot of people just talk about problems, like they're not really thinking about solution. And it goes back to when I was in Afghanistan, like those like UN videos and things like that. Oh, like millions of girls can't go to school, like the desperate faces of girls in poverty and all of that. And it just doesn't when I was watching it, I was like, okay, I've seen enough of that. And I still today it is like that. And it's that the other day I was talking to my cousin's daughter, and I was like, okay, can I tutor you once a week and like give you English lessons? And they were so happy, and then like the next day they were like, the next week they were kind of was like, the whole week we were waiting for that hour. And so I think because of internet, we can't just, my case was different because I was in a different family, and I had a grandfather who was like larger than life figure that I was able to do what I was able to do. But for everyone else, I think there needs to be investment in more creative solutions of, okay, they can't go to school. What's the next thing? Okay, we can still offer them English lessons. We can still find way for them to learn. And actually, I'm trying to work on, like, I'm currently working on a project that, like, creating a digital platform, and I'm calling it a room of our own. So that's like they have their own space to come together, read and write, and hopefully learn more. So this is what I'm like at the very basic step. to just not talk about problems and offer like some solution. And I have friends also, they actually have underground schools. And I think the more investment is making on those things, that will give hope for the girls, and it will hopefully eventually change the future.
Tell us about these underground schools. The idea sounds interesting. So this is something that happens in somebody's house, perhaps? Maybe some rich man's house, which has got a lot of space, and then he invites kids from around the neighborhood. Or how does it work? Tell us.
Yeah, so I have one friend, Pashtana Durrani, and she is like okay, so she said like family contacts her, and so okay, we want our girls to continue education, and so what she does is she provides them with laptops and internet connection, and then so like me, and then so those people like maybe from one district, they come together and say like, so okay, we have to create a space for the girls to learn. And so then like I think they have to change their maybe, so it's like a community thing, like a community comes together, and then they're like supported by this organization, like the Learn, the founder is my friend. And then that's like, then they have also like online like tutors from the outside world, and that's how they continue their education. So I think it's a lot. She says like, I don't tell people to come and learn. They have to take responsibility of the safety of their daughters. So it's not just, I think it's like not an individual saying, okay, I want to learn. It's like the family wants the girls to continue their education, and not just one family, many families, and then they come together, and then they're supported by outside, but I think they have to take the lead.
Have you any idea of when the Taliban sanctioned the internet, okayed it? Because earlier on, it had been forbidden by them. So if I remember right, in 1996 and subsequently until 2001, there was no television that was allowed and no internet that was allowed, except for military purposes, the Taliban communicating amongst themselves. But I'm not even sure about that. Do you know when the internet started penetrating Afghanistan?
Yeah, so when Afghanistan, I think it must have. So initially it was like a mobile, like from phone. It was so slow. I think. Well, must have been like 2007. Yeah, I think it must have been initially like early years of 2007, 2008. My brother was using it. Like whenever anything that new that came, like he would be the first to use it. So I think that from that I remember it was like 2008 something. And it's like the Google page would take like an hour to open up.
You probably had phone modems that you called up and then that would,
Yeah,
okay.
The dial-up connection, I used a lot. Yeah.
Okay, good. So now I think we are ready to take questions and comments. And people may want to ask you in Dari or Pashto. Is that okay?
So Pashto, yeah, I speak Pashto, but also understand Urdu, because I didn't go to school, so I can't speak
You understand
Dari.
Urdu, but not Dari. How's that?
Yeah, I watch TV, and that's how I know. Like I think as a lot of Afghans, we watch a lot of Bollywood, and Afghanistan. I think it's a story, because like after 2001, we didn't have our own entertainment, so we were entertained by Bollywood, and that's how I know.
तो बस फिर ठीक है, आपसे उर्दू में गुफ्तगू होगी.
ठीक है.
Okay. Right. So we're now ready for questions, comments, whatever. Okay.
Thank you. This is Tariq Sial. I am basically a journalist and pursuing PhD in American Studies in Quaid-e-Azam University. So basically, you are talking about yourself and your country. The problem, Afghanistan is basically the multi-ethnic country, multicultural and multi-sectarian as well. But Taliban is the majority of the Taliban are the Pakhtuns, and the very few are other communities included into it. So, what's your take that these other communities are not because Pakhtuns are also against them, but majorities of the Taliban are the Pakhtuns. So all are not Pakhtuns in Taliban, but other communities like we can say the Tajik, Uzbek, Hazaras, and few other communities. What are you thinking that why not they are like previously they are fighting with the Taliban, and this time there is less resistance? What do you think that what are the main reasons?
I think one of the reasons is like in the past, there was a civil war, and then the Taliban came in, and so they were. I mean, I think Taliban was a necessity then. Again, I study back the history, and Mullah Omar, for example, he when the Soviet withdrew, a lot of the people went back to their villages, and then they went like study like back to their madrasa or like mosques, and then. But then, like the Mullah Omar story in particular, he was one day trying to come to the city, and then he saw all like the mujahideens, fighting, and just not just fighting. I mean, I read stories of like forcing people to dance on their parents' grave, or like they invented this horrible ways of to torture people, and so that's why the Taliban came in. And so I it was like they had to recruit people, and they were not really militarily well equipped as they are now. Now they are stronger by the 20 years of war and fighting against one of the the mightiest army in the world, and so they're militarily better equipped with everything. I think with just financially, like how do they fund their insurgency in the 20 years. And so I think they're better educated in that way. And that's why they're able to take control of the full Afghanistan and not allowing, other groups to resist them the way it was like in the 90s when in Panjshir, there was still the resistance going on in Herat and for a long time. So that's my understanding of it.
Hello, my name is Muhibullah. I'm also Pakhtun, so I would like to make a comment and to support your answer. So when we look to Afghanistan, so the majority of people are Pakhtuns, so the number of Pakhtun is high in Afghanistan. That is one aspect. That's why we see a bigger number of Pakhtun recruited by Taliban. The second thing is that we Pakhtuns, we attach ourselves very closely to religion. So and we don't see that tendency in other ethnic groups. So because of our religious beliefs, we were more tilted towards being recruited easily. And I'm basically from South Valley, and I have seen this Talibanization and all that, and I'm a witness to it. And since we closely attach ourselves to the religious part, so that's why we are more in this group as compared to other ethnicity. So I just wanted to make that comment. Thank you.
Yeah, and also I think it's important also, like back in the 20 years also, like the Pashtuns and all, they were mostly in the villages, and they were the places mostly bombarded and things like that. So I think that also added a lot of the why majority of the top.
Thank you for a very lucrative insight. Wanted to appreciate that. It was very informative. My simple question is, what are they really fearing? I mean, so non-educating their kids, specifically females, is there a prior story you can tell us about that, that inculcates this fear factor? Could you elaborate a little bit more on that? I mean, it's a fear, right? That they're not, but what instigated it? Like, what's the historical perspective? Is it religious? Was it cultural? What's the thought part behind that? Does that make sense?
Yes. I think it's, again, like reading history books and things like that, like Mullah Omar's own mother, like she would like wash clothes by the water, and of course not fully covered and all of that. So I think what is, again, like, if you want to create an ideology to kill another ideology, you have to make the normal things really, really abominable. So, for example, as I said, I gave you an example of my aunt of when Mujahideen, they were like, okay, the clacking step of the heels. So like if you're in a madrasa or anywhere else and you want the person to convince the person to kill another person or like blow himself up in that place, what do you tell them? You said, well, everything they're doing is extremely sinful and bad, and killing them is okay. And so then you create this small like making like getting an education for women, and then you create, oh, so when she leaves the home, that's where like she also does other bad things. And so then you make this whole thing's really, really bad, so then it's acceptable, like, oh yeah, like it's acceptable to kill that person for that, so why not just ban that? So I think that's how I see it. I don't think it's like a story or some origin that you go back to. It's about how they were brainwashed.
So I think fundamentally it's a question of patriarchy. Where does patriarchy come from? That is something that an anthropologist could better tell us about. But let me ask you one thing, Sola. When the Americans were driven out, a lot of Afghans celebrated it, and they did so because the Americans, with their inability to distinguish between friend and foe, and with not much care about who they were killing, did kill a lot of innocent people, non-combatants, and the result was that they became extremely unpopular. So do you see that? Do you see people still celebrating the departure of the Americans and saying that now we are a free country?
No, that's not. I think this one thing is about Afghans as well, is like each government that is in power, they hate them, and then they want the opposite group. And so I think so. And then another thing was, I think it was mostly men who were celebrating the departure of the US. And like, I mean, I have like cousins telling me like, oh yeah, everything is fine, just like the male cousins, everything is fine, just girls don't go to school, so it's not like a big deal. But I think it's because the US left, there's a lot of poverty, you know, that the aid is not really the aid, like, you know, there was so much money flowing in when the US was there, and now it's like everything dried up. And so a lot of people complain about the poverty, and of course they're blaming it on Taliban, and they were like, yeah, it's just like those faces that just appeared on the streets, like our life just got worse. And so I think a lot of people are complaining, and also I think it's just like there's no entertainment, so they're banning everything. And so like there's this TikTok reel, it just like said, oh, like ban, welcome to the country of Afghanistan. So it's like so I think I don't think people are happy about what's happening.
The international organizations have pulled out and there's no money coming in. So where is Afghanistan deriving its finances from? Where's the local production, and production of what? How is the economy functioning? Can you give us an idea of that?
There's like, I think there's aid is like very, very minimum. And I think the starvation, I mean, I think like the UN all the time says like, okay, Afghanistan is on the brink of famine, and there's like, I think each winter there's so many young like children starving to death. So I don't think it's really, I don't think the economy is really functioning well.
But you know something very strange that, well, I found it very strange that someone who actually is at the black hole went to Afghanistan to meet his family, he's from there, came back and said, things are so expensive over here and they're so cheap out there. I don't know if, is that, how could that be? Is that true? Is it not true? I don't know. I wish to be informed on that.
I don't.
So you're shaking your head. Would you like to?
Yes, please.
Yeah.
So maybe just to shed a little bit light on myself. My name is Michel de Zwart. I'm from the Netherlands. I've ties to Afghanistan because I'm in a foundation in the Netherlands cooperating with the Atta Welfare Foundation. Basically what we want to do, and this also gives answer to the question that you asked, what we want to do is develop a hospital in the city of Kabul which is accessible to the people who belong to the less affordable, so to speak. What we have encountered in the Netherlands about the donor community, the international donor community stays away to a very large extent from Afghanistan. So I thought, okay, let's go and opt for more private initiatives. Because private initiatives have a bigger chance to operate also in Afghanistan. Well, that was not so much the case. The moment that also we applied for a bank account doing business on Afghanistan, the banks in the Netherlands, and this applies to all European banks as well, I guess, said, no, if you're going to transfer money into Afghanistan, we don't want to have that kind of liabilities, because we also have to do our accountabilities to the government, saying, okay, no money is going to the bad person, so to speak, in that country. And that's some kind of policy that is tremendously hard to break. So even from a private sector development, how to do that, how to organize that, we all have to bypass things. That's also now our own process of finding the right entries. And it seems to be that the UNDP, being active in Afghanistan, basically coordinates all efforts. So that would also imply for us, if we want to do something, we have to cooperate with the UNDP. And make sure that somehow we also get access to the fundings over there, showcasing also good project plans that they can also help to financially support. And then if everything goes well, it's not very hard on paper, but also sometimes unofficially doing business in Afghanistan because of the fact that it is a pariah country in the international domain. I hope that will breach. So it's constantly now, until, for example, the Taliban is being formally recognized by the international community, it's constantly finding bypasses and finding alternative roads to do business in Afghanistan. That means also that foreign direct investments won't have a chance to flow into Afghanistan and basically come to the same conclusion. The economy is not functioning at the moment. So hopefully that will be done. I am extremely proud of your story and how you've managed for yourself to create this situation as you are now in. It would be great if more education can flow in, and not only in Afghanistan itself, but also came yesterday from refugee camps, Afghan refugee camps here in Pakistan, seeing also the people having no future at all. And I am also inspired by your story. Okay, maybe indeed opt for small solutions, but just bringing a computer and maybe doing remote lessons. The only thing is then indeed how to get also the pencils and the paper stuff in so that they can make the notes as well. Because sometimes you need that to make your notes and to create that you're remembering also the lessons that you have been taught. So yeah, but nevertheless, big things always start with very small steps, and inshallah, hopefully things can be done. But tell your story, and who knows that we can also cooperate, and that your lessons can also be broader shared, even in the Netherlands.
Thank you.
My name is Yasir, and I study law. My question is that in your case, your family was a little bit cooperative. They brought you the things that you wanted and you studied at home. But now in Afghanistan, not every family is such cooperative. And they might have faced some economic problems, and they their families might be stricter. And these underground schools might not work for long terms. So can you foresee any long-term solution for the education of the Afghan girls in Afghanistan? So this is my question. I
mean, I think as long as Taliban don't change, I don't think there can be any other solution other than like online schools, underground schools, and anything like that. So, yeah.
Salam. Hope you're fine and doing well. Well, I'm also from Afghanistan, from Mazar-e-Sharif. So, as someone who has visited Afghanistan very recently, to add to her words, that people are not really delighted about the current regime, because recently my brother was stopped by the Taliban and he was slapped because of wearing Western clothes. Yeah, that's what happened. And also, when I recently visited Afghanistan, in every checkpoints, we have to turn off the music whenever we come across with the Taliban. And there are so many other things similar to this. So obviously people are not happy, they're not delighted about the current regime, and we are all suffering, unfortunately. Yeah.
Yes, but it is not just Afghanistan, it is also Pakistan that we need to worry about. Look at what happened in Ichra just yesterday, where this girl had halwa or something like that written on her t-shirt, and she was accused of blasphemy and would nearly have been killed, except that there was intervention by a very brave policewoman. Now that sort of thing would have been unheard of 30 years ago, 40 years ago. Now it's become common, and if one goes to Peshawar, you don't see any woman over there on the streets. It's all burqa, 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 and this is an abomination. To put a woman in a burqa is an abomination.
Yes.
And we have to now address what is in our country, not just what's happening in Afghanistan, for which we must bear a big amount of blame.
Yes. Obviously.
Any other question? Okay.
Yes, I have a question. You mentioned about the online classes and all that. Well, I'm a bit curious. Like, actually, it's a very. If you listen to not just me but many other students, you'll hear that we get bored of online classes. Sometimes what we will do is that we will, okay, classes is happening on one tab, and the other tab we are just doing our own stuff, like watching YouTube videos and all that. So how do you make sure? So are you sure that with these the education is still going, or are there any methods used to keep their focus on this, so that, or are they the students themselves that committed to learning?
Yeah, I think in my case, I was determined to learn, and of course, I really did enjoy a lot of the lessons, but I was like, I have to learn it. I don't think you just have, like, it's important, and also I think it depends on, I think now we have so many choices. I mean, if you can speak English, if you can understand English, I think YouTube, there's so many, like, not just YouTube, like Coursera, it's like courses from MIT, Harvard, any subjects. And there are parts that you might not enjoy it, but I think if you look at the whole picture, then you have to be motivated, like, okay, I will learn this thing, and then I will be able to speak about it, and who knows, I will add something new to it. So yeah, I think learning shouldn't just be done to enjoy it.
You know, I'd like to address what you said. Yes, it is absolutely true that online learning hasn't worked very well in Pakistan, and we saw that during COVID. And it won't work unless there's motivation of the student herself or himself. Now, where does motivation come from? I think it's a multiplicity of sources. But the most important thing is what happens in your own home. If your parents are those who read books, who engage in some kind of intellectual, philosophical discussion, then the children will want to learn. They will want to become not just literate, but they'll want to become educated. That is a problem that I think is huge in Pakistan. If you go to the houses of our university professors, you won't see any books over there. They'll be watching these stupid TV programs all the time. They are incapable of writing a paragraph. They're incapable of any kind of educated discussion. And so even though they have PhDs, they don't know anything. Ultimately, it all comes down to internal motivation. What is it that you want to do in life, and And education then is a means towards that.
Assalamu alaikum. My question is, it's not a question, like, basically, if you like stop educating girls, so in the longer run, as a healthcare professional, I am from the medical field, so in the longer run, you don't have enough female healthcare providers. So do you think that maybe in the longer run, the Taliban or you know, the conservative government, they have some plan in mind? Because stopping the education obviously ultimately results in disruption of the services that, you know, females need females for. So do you think that maybe that would ultimately force them to soften it? Because if they have to compromise on, you know, education and then the parda, so maybe they would choose the latter.
I think, again, back into, I think, about the Taliban story in the 90s, they really didn't care. And there were, I think, Afghanistan, it was the only country where I think in every, it's like the female were dying on childbirth. And it's happening again, too. I don't think, and I think their reasoning will be like, oh, yeah, so it's like you're born and you're, the time you will die is also written, so it is your fate. I don't think they really care about that, and I think I don't think they care about that. If they did, then they would have changed.
Hello, ma'am. Myself, Junaid. I just first want to ask that Afghanistan remained a war theater from decades. Is this like the leaders and notables are responsible or the great powers? First question. And the second question is, at that time, like notables and leaders welcome the communist regime and then countered by the capitalist, like the American regime. Later, now, like Talibans are not letting the girls to study, like the women education. At that time, notables and the leaders were supporting communist regime, later capitalist regime. So now the general public, as I know, maybe I may be wrong, half of the population are supporting the Talibans, half are they do not support them. So the general public or the Afghan peoples are waiting kind of a French revolution, like what will happen in future. Talibans, now they are favoring them. In future, they want, like, there may be chances of revolution, so the things will get changed in the country.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think time will tell. Yeah, I mean, so far there isn't. I think the world is kind of done with Afghanistan.
The first question is important. Notables and the leaders are responsible, or the great powers? Afghanistan remain a war theater.
I think the great powers, because go to any country, there will be enough people, give them a lot of money, there will be enough people who's going to do what you want. And so, and these are kind of bought, you know, by whatever country. So I think that's the same, it's true about like the communist, like I have studied back its origin and everything. They were not the people that were really doing it for the equality purposes and all of that. And then again, like in 2001, the democracy that came in, it wasn't like natural, it was just a garb that was, like those warlords, everyone were just like dressing in that garb, and it wasn't like anything. It wasn't really capitalism. It wasn't like a fight between communism and capitalism. It was, it was just like a nice thing that given to this theater of war. So like a good theme to have.
But let's recognize one thing. Backward societies keep their women backwards. And that is the reason that those societies are stuck in time. What the modern world, what modern civilization has taught us, is that women can do everything that men can do, and that women should have just as many rights and equal rights as men. Now, great powers can play around with whatever there is on the ground, but ultimately it is a question of the cultural values of that society. Now, the Americans or the Russians, nobody said that go attack this woman because she has halwa written over here. That is something that comes from within us, and that is something that we have to fight for, and not point to someone in India or someone in Sri Lanka or in America or whatever. That is our own internal problem.
Sir, this, I'm sorry, I can share my views on this. This paid Islamization, controlled Islamization is basically controlled by somewhere else. If this halwa event happen, behind there are many cyber wars, there are many planners. So yes, you can blame our society like the developing world, but behind there are a centuries principle that's going on, and the innocent peoples are facing.
Okay.
Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum. I just want to mention you that what is the main basic reason behind this indiscrimination towards women by the Taliban? I know they have their own ideology, religious ideology, but I think Islam also do not stop women to get education. So I know there may be many reasons, but I want you to highlight the only one basic reason, that why they are indiscriminate towards women.
So first of all, so if you go back to the origin of Taliban, they grew up in villages and they didn't see their mother, their grandmother going to school. And so what they saw, that's a normal society. That's how everything is. That's like one reason. And second reason is, again, if you go back to those 20 years, they had Pakistan, Taliban had their own education ministry, which is like disrupting education, like in girls' education in Afghanistan. And so one of the reasons, to encourage people to fight is to say this is really bad. And so you have all those fighters fighting for this reason that these girls are doing something horrible and we have to fight it for the good of the world. Then even like the leaders don't believe it. Like most of the Taliban leaders, their daughters go to schools in Doha, or like some of them who were in Pakistan, they were going to school. So it's like a weapon to use. It's a war, like a weapon of war. It's not, I don't think, yes, to recruit people, and it's not something the leaders themselves believe in.
Okay, how do you see Afghanistan in future? What are your hopes about Afghanistan?
I mean, to be honest, I really don't have any hopes right now, because some of the girls I talked to, they said, well, we feel like we are wounded birds and we're stuck. And yes, people talk about there is peace, but this peace is suffocating women. So as a woman, I really don't see hope right now.
Well, we can't end on this depressing note. Will someone please say something positive? Okay. Okay.
Online.
Yeah. Online questions. Yeah.
Hello, Sola. It's a pleasure to have you join us. Given that this session is live streaming on the Black Hole's Facebook page, we have received numerous questions. While many have already been discussed in this discussion or in this session, there are just few remaining that I would like to put forward to you. First, narrating a story stands as a form of resistance in such troubled times. Could you share about your memoir, particularly how it acts as a catalyst for broader conversation on gender equality and education?
Yeah, so my memoir is about Afghanistan and it's the history of Afghanistan, but it's mainly about my education and how like I didn't know anything and the struggle that I faced to get an education and where I am today and how education is like an individual empowerment and it's not a lot of people say educate a girl and educate a nation and things like that, but for me when I was educating myself I didn't see how I'm gonna change anything. Like would I even be able to leave my room? But it was individually empowering me to seeing my place in the world and so yeah, and I hope that inspire more people, not and also like leader. It's not like education as a mean to other end, just like education in itself. Is like that's I don't know, I feel like that's like education learning is so sacred for me, and so like when I came to the US people would be studying for exam and things and I felt like they were diminishing the value of learning.
So education is like having wings. You don't know where you're going to fly to, but unless you have those wings, you will be then stuck where you are on the ground.
Yeah, and like reject the old ways of thinking and people telling you who you are and then I think it just I don't know, I feel like you exist like like learning for me gives meaning to my life and like purpose to my existence, make me alive. While without learning, I just don't know how would
Are you aware of other people in the Afghan diaspora who are involved in trying to do something for the Afghans who are in Afghanistan?
Yeah, so one person I mentioned is Pashtana Durrani, and I think she might be a good person to talk in this event as well. She recently had a memoir, "Last to Eat, Last to Learn," and it's about her journey and her activism and what she's still currently doing in Afghanistan, of like running those underground schools.
Just one more question and a remark. How did or from where did you find the courage and determination to continue despite all obstacles that you faced? What kept you going?
I think I had so many questions about the world, how it is, why it is, and like, why I'm here, like, what's the meaning of my existence and all of that. So I think it was was those questions. And second was my grandfather and how he learned himself. And that was for me, like, yes, if he could do it at that time when like he only had a radio and a dictionary, like I can do it when I had tea, and he also had family to feed. He was not really rich, and so he could do it at that time. I could do it when I didn't have to worry about earning money and I had more access to things than him. So that those were the two things that made me, like, I started, and then once I started, I was learning. I was loving learning so much that I never thought of like giving up.
One just final remark. While the Taliban or any authoritarian regime may impose bans and oppress people, the strength of human resilience lies in its ability to navigate challenges, aspire to significant goals, and practice fortitude to transform the dreams into reality. Thank you for your fight, and thank you for being such an inspiration.
Thank you for...
I think that's a very appropriate point to end at. That was a very appropriate comment. And Sola, we much enjoyed talking to you and having you here.
Thank you.
We'll have you again at some point in the future. Take care.
Thank you. I really enjoyed talking and a very engaging conversation.
Excellent. Okay. Thanks again and bye.
Bye.